a very special guest on stage, and we're going to get into a conversation about her leadership, about her journey. We know that Ate Christie's joining us from Houston, so let's give Houston some love. She's going to sing a little too on stage, but
Is that adobo?
I could totally read her bio, but you could also read that on the card. I just want to speak straight from the heart in terms of when I had the pleasure and the privilege of meeting her and admiring her leadership, not just for her regional community across her state, but nationally. As a trustee with the National American Federation for Filipino American Associations. So our version of the NAACP, national voice for Philam concerns and civic empowerment, which is part and parcel with our mission. I've been able to witness her work and her artistry as one of the founding trustees of FONS, the Filipino American National Historical Society, their Houston chapter. She's really left an indelible mark and continues to bring her research, her scholarship, her business mind to enrich the Houston community and statewide, I'd argue. And we are just so privileged and honored to have her here to help us uplift today's theme of We Got Us. So we'll be digging into her story, how she defines her Pinayism, and what words and gems she will drop with our community here today. So I'll just read a little bit of her bio, and then we'll get right into these questions, Ate Christie. And in terms of timekeeping and making sure that I help us run even later than we are, hopefully someone could raise up some signs in the back. But Christie Poisson, yeah?
Close enough.
Oh no! Okay. It's just Ate Christie, everybody. How often do you not know their full name or their last name, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's like me with everybody in this room. Ate Christie has her MBA and has worked for Shell USA for 25 years out of Houston. And she currently works as an information digital technical advisor for subsurface and wells with a deep background in information risk management, cybersecurity, downstream manufacturing, HR, IT operations, project management, and she's also an astronaut. Can we add that in at the end? Give it up for Ate Christie. I think she needs no introduction. We're going to get into it. Now let's just kick off with the very first question. Ate Christie, if we may, let me get these questions going. My phone is freezing.
No, thanks for that introduction. You know, sometimes I still have to, you know, when I hear myself on those introductions and you read yourself in your own bio, you really should try to embrace your own accomplishments. So to me, I'm like, even when I hear it, you know, I think that's one of the things that, you know, you do not underestimate who you are and what you're capable of. And even as I've had this long career so far, I still have that feeling of, who is she talking about? You know, and did I really do that? So anyways, let's get right to it, Jill.
Yeah, all right. So tell us about your personal journey around professional leadership. As I shared, you built your career with Shell and, you know, really at the intersections of technology and cybersecurity. And I'm curious about what elements of your identity as a woman, as a mother, as a sister, as a Pinay, as a community leader, how have these identities influenced how you've navigated in that particular workplace culture that we know is heavily male-dominated, real, definitely, it's a heavily white community, so we're curious about that a little bit.
No, and I'm gonna highlight a few bullet points. So absolutely, friend me on LinkedIn, you'll see the whole chronology of my career. I'm not gonna go through every bit of detail, but I do find that some people who are looking for mentoring, they wanna kind of see the stepping stones that somebody like me took. So yeah, we have energy in Texas. We say energy now, not oil. Because we're all moving towards, you know, zero-based carbon by 2050. But definitely have a look at that chronology. So there's some governance around those steps. But I'm going to start with jobs that you guys are probably surprised to hear about. So, I mean, I didn't come from a very wealthy family. I was the oldest of 5 kids, very Catholic Filipino family. Sound familiar to anybody in the audience? And, you know, Lola raising me, you know, and she wasn't the kind of Lola that made cookies and stuff. She was very hardcore Ilocana, you know, you better pull up your bootstraps kind of grandma. And she was tough on us. And I was the eldest, and you always heard the mantra, you better set examples all the time. But really, I would have to say the humble beginnings on those, many of you, you know, who are just getting started in your career and early in life, you work the hard jobs in the beginning. You're not always going to start with a six-figure income on the first day. And it was those humbling jobs that I was a waitress for almost 5 years through college. I didn't get through in exactly 4 years. I had to pay my way through college. And it was a lot of those odd jobs that I learned so much about humans and profiling them, and customer service, and handling very difficult people, and how to be around those types of folks. So I want to just recognize that even if you do have those kind of jobs that you might consider that aren't really something you want to put on your resume later in life, I think you should consider what you're learning from each of those jobs. Everything has something to teach you, and it's important to embrace that. You might even learn with a lot of those jobs what you don't ever want to do ever again for the rest of your life. So that part of forming your identity is going through things and failing a little bit on learning a lot of those types of lessons. So it's not always going to be ice cream and rainbows with every job. You have to kind of try different things to see what you don't like. You know, I had somebody tell me once, like, how do you, you know, maybe you don't know what you want, but you definitely know what you don't want. And how do you know who you are unless you try different things? Then you definitely know who you aren't. So that's part of identity. It's kind of a, if you think about a mathematical equation, A minus C equals B, somehow you'll figure out by trying hard things what you are. So, but you had a lot of things going on in that question. So that's why I had to write this response down. But another thing is, you know, with learning a lot of those lessons, you have to learn to not react, right? Part of learning and having difficult challenges, I think, as a young person, and I wish somebody told me this when I was, you know, maybe a lot of your ages, right? I wish I had somebody to tell me that, hey, you know, a lot of you have to evolve at some point through every lesson, right? You can't dwell on regret, or I shoulda, woulda, coulda, or it was my fault, or I have imposter syndrome, or whatever. At some point, part of identity finding, right, is trying to figure out who you are internally. Okay, and you can dwell in that space for a while, and then it's okay to do that. But after a while, when you want to evolve, you have to kind of figure out how you want to interact with others from those lessons you learn, right, from your own internal struggle. Do not dwell in internal struggle for too long. You have to, at some point, be outside of yourself and look at yourself and say, you know what, that was a hard lesson, but take a deep breath and then internalize. And you have to kind of almost paradigm shift yourself into thinking, how can I take what this very difficult lesson was and become a better person and change the world, for that matter, from this lesson I have to learn. And I know it sounds like some big words for tough things maybe that you might be going through. You know, I'm a mom of a 20-year-old, so I'm a therapist on the side to my kids as well. And a 15-year-old is trying to find his way through the world, and I'm reminded, you know, of these difficult struggles I had at that age. And I just kind of want to reiterate that it's okay to, you know, have these jobs that you really don't love, but you have to draw from it those experiences. And part of it is really answering the question for you, what evolution is. But I will say, being in Texas, yes, I'm in the energy industry. I am often the only brown, if not female, person in the room of a lot of, you know, white people. And I'm going to first start off with this by saying, I love white people. I'm married to one. So my kids are mestiza. But that being said, you know, I grew up with a lot of white kids, and really, I went to a private school. There was one Filipino boy growing up, and everybody assumed just because we were both Filipino, we were going to marry each other. And you know, that I didn't think that was fair to assume just because the two Filipinos in a school, you know. And you often, maybe some of you are from small towns. I did talk to some of y'all, and you said my community isn't that diverse. Often I was always the only brown, if not minority person in the room. So I really do envy the fact that, you know, everywhere I look around here, there's an ocean of, you know, Kayumanji, there's brown everywhere, you know. And I think, don't take that for granted. That's definitely something that you can, you know, there's a relaxing ease that I find when everybody around you looks similar, is the same. I mean, if I had even seen, I don't know, more Filipino boys, maybe I would have dated a Filipino boy, I don't know. But, you know, that being said, that's another time, Gels, we talk about that another time.
Part 2.
But that being said, though, you know, you find it as an opportunity in corporate America when you become very good at problem solving and kind of get to the heart of the matter. And, you know, when people look at me, you know, they don't see that, you know, I have 20 some odd years of service. They see a brown girl. And until I sit there and open my mouth and tell them what for, you know, and what I have to bring to the table, then they don't see color anymore. They see a person that can bring to the table some of their problem solving skills and talent. And I have to, you know, working, I guess, 3 or 4 times harder and keeping to reminding people, it does get old, right? Kind of, okay, am I gonna have to be the one to give this guy the diversity lesson of the day again? But, you know, but people are on different journeys. They're all innately curious. I did learn, though, I will say this. Philippine American History Month, you put out a tray of lumpia and pancit, all of a sudden everybody knows a little bit about Filipinos. They're dropping by my desk with some knowledge, right? And I was just like, you know, lumpia in their mouth, all of a sudden they're, you know, talking about all the nurses that they've ever met in their whole life. Right? But, you know, but that being said, though, it's definitely one, you know, how do you work with people like that? I think it's just, I grew up with a lot of them, and it was, to this day, they're my best allies in the office, the ones I grew up with. Because they're like, remember when we went to your house and there was like these fish eyes in the pot? And then now that they're older people working in corporate, they are there educating their white peers. They're like, well, you may not realize, but you know, she's just as American as I am. We grew up in the same school, same neighborhood. Okay, she may have had something different for dinner than I did, but I invited her to my house and I had my food too. And so, you know, in the end of the day, when it comes down to brass tack fundamentals, you know, we all had our same emotional issues, and we kind of get to that beyond the superficial, you know, the color in the room. And I think that's part of building relationships. It's like, if you choose not to kind of participate in a group of people that don't look like you, then they miss out on an opportunity to like learn about who you are. Because I always try to teach it like something new that you get to learn. I'm like, it's like a Discovery Channel in here. But we'll go more into the other questions and I'll elaborate on that. So let's move on if that's okay. But those are kind of my top thoughts on that. Hopefully that was helpful.
No, absolutely helpful. And as I sat here and listened to I'm going to hit this in broad strokes, but the very importance of a space like a FLYPINAY is because we can all live a Pinay existence, but are we always talking about our diverse Pinay experiences? Because nobody at my dinner table growing up entertained me in a conversation about my Pinayism. A queer, openly lesbian Pinay, nobody was asking me, yes, you're a Pinay, we look at you superficially, and we're making assessments about who you are and the value you bring, but we're also not engaging you in a conversation about how you're navigating this world. And so you bring up a really good point, Ate Christy, about yes, we want to share our cultural vibrancy and our food with our allies, because we're not over here spreading hate toward any group, any other cultural group, any other ethnic or racial group. But I think part of when we talk about civic engagement and power building is you take our food and you accept us as people and you call our names and you bring us up with you. So when those promotions are open, will they show their allyship and speak your name and put you in as a candidate for that senior vice president position? I like that you understand lumpia, but will you also understand me as a person, a whole person that can do your job 10 times over? So that's my other little like consideration that you just kind of like awoke it in my brain.
Yeah.
But can we talk about your Pinayism?
So segue, that's pretty good. I see how you set that up. That's pretty good. I like that.
I did a little something.
Not your first rodeo.
I went to my first rodeo last week in Houston, though.
Yes, you did.
Okay, we won't talk about that.
Anyways, no, but that, you know, you brought up a lot of really good things. And so I'll tell you the story of WAVE. WAVE is Women Adding Value Everywhere. So at some point in my career, I had a kid, got pregnant, and I didn't really experience the kind of discrimination, if you will, of being a woman, if not a brown woman, until I had a baby. And a white male was my manager who did not know what to do with it. I had to be at home on bed rest, and gave me the lowest performance I ever had in my life in corporate America. And this was before working from home was acceptable. And he said, because you just simply weren't there. Even though every day I answered every call, interacted with everyone, and was there in every way that I possibly could be, because I physically could not go to work because of my condition, not just being pregnant, but it was a high-risk pregnancy. I could have lost the baby if I had gone in, but I did. I called everybody. I did what we didn't have video chat then, but you know, did my best to be as present as I could. And some people were like, I didn't even know you were out. But he was like, well, you weren't physically here, therefore. And that injustice drove me to join the women's group in my company to try to understand, well, what's going on with, you know, this behavior, you know, what can I do to make a difference? How can I make peace with this? Because I was so pissed, right? You know, there's an injustice that happened to me, and I go, women are 50% of the population here, and you mean to tell me you're going to give them low performances every time they have a baby? That the math is not going to make sense.
My first time ever.
Yeah, I mean, but he didn't know how to. He needed a lot of education, right? He had never, I think, managed a brown person before, much less a female. Maybe it was maybe males, but not female. And he didn't know what to do with this, you know, condition that I had, much less pregnant with high risk. So, you know, and eventually somehow I rose to become president of this organization, just somehow, right? Because I was insatiably curious about understanding the things that you talked about. What are the barriers to career advancement? And so I had learned a lot of things about you are working in an environment that you have to call out. Like it or not, guys, you're going into a culture that is not yours. It's white. It's a white culture, white male culture. So you have to kind of understand which environment you're going into, not blindly. So one of the things that we teach in the women's program that I became president of is that you have to be politically aware. I'm not saying politically aware people don't like that word politics, right? Because it denotes kind of, oh, I want to stay out of it, heads down, I just want to get my paycheck. But believe it or not, being politically aware is part of your job. Now, there are some studies that show that if you do not have this level of political awareness, you fall into certain categories. You are either going to be, usually you end up being on this scale, what they call, you know, there's different animals that portray these characteristics. One of them is a lamb, you know, which represents somebody who has no, it's on a scale of having political awareness and, what's the other thing on the scale? Political awareness and the ability to kind of be able to change the environment, wisdom, right? You know, so usually somebody who is a lamb doesn't have a lot of political awareness, and you know they might be really new and naive, and they end up being, unfortunately, lamb for slaughter. You're the first victim, so you don't want to be that person. And in the extreme opposite of scale, you want to be the owl. You want to have some understanding of your political environment, and you have to be able to have an understanding of how to navigate that environment. Then they have two other animals that are representative that you need to be aware of at all times in your environment, because there's usually people who represent either the fox or the donkey. So the fox is usually somebody who is very politically aware, but they're usually out for themselves. They're not there for the greater good. Now, the donkey represents somebody who has no political awareness, but they're also out for themselves, though. So if you think about that dynamic, like, you ideally want to be an owl. You want to have political awareness, but anything you do as a leader eventually is for the greater good. Now the lamb wants to work for the greater good, but they have no political awareness. So they end up kind of getting in trouble and being victimized. And they don't know what happened because they weren't aware of what happened with the donkey and the fox. So I can't remember the name of the study, but it is a standard thing of learning about political awareness. And when you're coming into a white male environment, you need to be able to have that political understanding of those. That's like not even something that's Asian specific or color specific. Now, when I was president of this women's group and I started learning about all these kind of tricks of the trade of gender differences, like women, believe it or not, men, they get over stuff real quick when they make each other mad at meetings. Women, we don't. We remember till the day we die. That girl pissed me off. You know, do we bring each other up or bring each other down in corporate, right? Yeah. So you have to kind of think about those type of behaviors that we're doing as women when we're around too many women. But you're in the male environment, you notice they get argue in a meeting, but then they're ready to go to the bar after. You know, they get over it real quick. It was just, hey, what happened? They were like, well, I'm loyal to the team. What if you get a new boss? Well, I'm loyal to the new team. They have these very different behaviors that we have to understand, not just with white males, but just with males in general, there's differences. And what women do, not always in the Pinayism, are, may not be supporting each other, because in a corporate environment, you may be competing with each other because you want to appeal to maybe the white male environment. So you have to kind of get out of your own head to kind of think about how do we learn from each other these challenges and barriers to advancement. So, and I could probably do a whole, actually I have done classes on this, but I could go all day to talk about what those are just for gender difference, much less being, brown, Asian American, or Pinay. And the Pinayism, after I was done being president of this women's organization, it still wasn't enough for me. I didn't embrace my Asianness, my Filipino Americanness. And that's how I ended up becoming involved in the community. So I wanted more. So I got tapped into a leadership program called Asian Women Empowered. And they picked 12 women throughout the United States to enter into a leadership program. And then we go to 3 different areas of the United States to do intense 3 to 4 day training on identity, believe it or not. And to me, I think that was kind of where I started to really try to embrace what my own ethnicity means to me in my leadership as a person. And it was very difficult. Okay, at first they were like, you need to come up with a project that impacts 20 people. And I was like, I'm related to 20 people. I'll just have a merienda. Done. And they're like, no, Christy, go back to the drawing board. That's not good enough. I said, well, maybe I'll build a daycare program at my kid's school. Not deep enough, back to the drawing board. So these were Asian women leaders who forced me to dig deeper. And eventually they were like, well, what encompasses your identity? And I was like, well, my grandmother. She raised me. My values are hers. She cooked for me. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll create a recipe book of her recipes, but she's the main character. But I want to be able to talk about how the recipes influence the family culture and behavior. I'm going to make the kids cook the food, because the first thing we do when we lose our culture is that the kids don't know how to speak the language, which is me, and then we don't remember how to cook our food. So we made them cook all the Filipino dishes of our Lola, and then we asked them present it at the merienda with everyone. And it was a success, I think, but it was, yes, I wasn't related to all 20 of them, but it was a deeper experience for them, because then I documented it in a book, before Pinterest was popular. I was like probably the first one to blog this. If you see really, really old posts of Pinterest, I did all those stories on there and reposted them with photos. But I mean, my point is that I'm trying to summarize here is that it took a lot of work to really get that identity work done from my Asian American side to reconcile with the corporate side. So through my journey, I hope that this resonates for some of you on what you could probably do and some tools that you can have in your wheelhouse. Anyways, we probably have more to talk about, so I'll leave it to you to segue to the next level of discussion.
I don't know about y'all, but all I heard in Ate Christie's vulnerability and her openness is the importance and the root of knowledge of thyself. Because when we're thrust into these conditions like corporate America, Western imperialism, different frames of white patriarchal intellect, all of our workshops today, can we just give it up for all of our workshop facilitators? In any one theme or way, they're teaching about unlearning, decolonization, healing, engaging in culturally responsive and humble practices to bring and to reject these conditions that you describe, which is when we're contorted and put into an ultra competitive, we need to be the best, we need to be the first, we need to be there the earliest and they're the latest. I leave early and I'm gonna do all that because I'm not here to prove to anybody else but myself. So going back to the knowledge of thyself and how these conditions, and I think you said it best, we're in their reality, we're in their imagination. And so why do we need to contort and reject our cultural experiences, our identity, the knowledge of ourselves to become catty, to fight with each other, to hold grudges, to be made to believe there are only crumbs left for us to fight for when we need to continuously tap into our abundance. So pre-colonial, gender fluidity, everything that our workshops are promoting today really being about, when I think of a Filipina XRO, I think of love. And everything you just said about how your identity helped you transcend some of these harmful systems that you had to navigate through. And shout out to you, Ate Christie, higher ranking executive, transcending. The key to that was your identity and your knowledge of self?
Well, and definitely understanding that, the crowd mentality, right? People have heard of that concept, I'm sure, right? Does everybody here know what that is?
Tell us.
Okay. The concept of crowd mentality is that in a group of people, if somebody achieves wonderful things in their career, sometimes in a group, you don't celebrate with them. You just say things to bring them down. And it may not be intentional, but it's kind of something that, you have to kind of look outside yourself to go, how can we evolve as a people versus, you're stronger together when you can bring, lock arms with other people versus sitting there and saying, hey, that person's up there. I'm going to celebrate with them, but I want to learn from them. How can I get a lesson out of them rather than be jealous or rather than bring them down? So I think, but like I said though, the 3 steps of change, right? I mean, I bring out all these tools in my wheelhouse because they've been helpful for me as a framework. Is like, we definitely have to have an understanding of evolving for self, right? And then once you don't live in the self too long though, because you have to be able to take those lessons to evolution. In order to take those lessons to evolution, you have to be able to figure out how you interact with others. And if you're celebrating with others, you're being positive, you have to, that energy actually begots more positive energy. And then the third is, of course, how do you make world change? And I'm looking at everybody in here, and I know that all of you all are potential leaders if you're here today, right? So if you're all potential leaders, many of you have to consider, and these aren't just linear steps you just say, when I'm aged 20 to 30, I shall do internal change. And when I'm 30 to 40, I shall do interpersonal change. When I'm 40 to 50, I shall change the world. No, you go through all those cycles cyclically at any given point in time, depending on where you are in life. And you go up and down that ladder all the time. I'm always revisiting back self. But but my lesson again there is like, don't dwell in self for so long that you can't grow. So for sure, yeah.
I'm gonna wrap my last question sort of into 2, but I know you'll knock both out. And then we'll open it up. We have time for like 1 audience question, right, Abby? She's looking at me like, hurry. No.
You already blew your time.
I know, it's okay. This is, all I told Dr. Christie was, what we're doing up here is really going to mimic the hours-long conversations we've had at her dining room table in Houston.
Yes.
Yep, that's what this
And,
is.
I encourage all of y'all to have coffee chats with each other and get deep and ugly and cry and, have these discussions. This is how you build trust in your community. And you know what? All these conversations I think about, they either ended up in a poem or books,
Talk about your book real quick.
Which one?
Oh, see that? Okay, I want to talk about your cultural work and your leadership and a little bit tell us about the book that many, but let's talk about the Filipinos in Houston book. What was that journey? She published the first ever, historic anthology of documenting Filipino-American history and legacies out of Houston. And then tell us a bit about the Philam community in Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, shout out to the Texans in the room. Where are you? Anthony. Where are you? Anthony. I blame Anthony for all my Filipino problems in Texas. So Anthony has definitely become what they call him the mayor of Houston, right? Yeah.
Yes, he is. We can't walk into
Very
any one room
humble.
without him saying hi to 20 people
Yeah,
at a time.
he's like, what'd you drop on the floor? Another name. Man, that guy knows everyone. So, and my brother, where are you, John? Where are you, John? All right, that's my bro. Anyways, how did I get involved in all this? So there you go. Remember I told, there's John, that's my bro. So we got involved, first you need to understand, remember I told you how I got involved with my grandmother's story? Then eventually I got him, my dad said, why are you talking about only your Lola? What about your Lolo? So he gave me a stack of papers, which were my grandfather's veteran papers. And he said his entire life he fought for his recognition and his benefits, and here are all the rejection letters from the congressman. And it didn't waver him, he just kept writing them back throughout his life until he died. And he never saw that justice. So when I learned about that injustice, remember there's a theme here, you get these injustices that drive you. These started to define me and my identity. So I was pissed. And I wrote the right people in Congress to go get that recognition. I didn't hear back. And then Anthony's, he was like, oh, I've been doing that work forever. And Anthony had actually helped, kind of pass petitions to help get the pension recognition through Congress. So if you had any lolos in either the Philippines or here who got reparations, because that's really what it was, they called it a settlement payment, but that was reparations. If you knew anybody that got that, Anthony was part of that. And so, yes. I know all the Filipinos, you're getting it, that's good, so no crab mentality, good stuff. So, but that was part, but hearing about that, other Filipinos were part of that. I had skin in the game now because it happened in my family, the injustice, right? You gotta have skin in the game. People don't get involved in these efforts just because, oh, it's a good thing, let's help the veterans. No, you knew a veteran, it happened in your family, you gotta be pissed, right? And a lot of it was paperwork, getting lost in the transition and the handshake of the independence of the Philippines. And I didn't even know any of this. I had to learn it. And I had to look at his papers and I put him against American timeline. So that inspired me to then, Anthony was like, Christy, you're already doing this history stuff. Why don't you start a historical chapter in Houston? Bonds. And so he says, you should go to Fonz San Diego or something and go see if you like it and then maybe start the chapter. And so I was trying to get recognition from my grandfather, and then that's when I met Tony Taguba. And so in Major General Tony Taguba, if you don't know who he is, look him up, look up the Taguba papers. It's a very historical moment in time in which he fought for the injustice in Abu Ghraib in front of Congress. And it was the first time a lot of Filipinos in the world saw a brown person testifying in Congress on TV. It was crazy, but he's historical, I admire him much. But now we're peers because then he helped pass the Congressional Gold Medal, and I was in charge of the region in Texas. But Anthony was like, you're already doing this history stuff, start a history chapter. Like, you think I have time to start a history chapter? I'm trying to pass a bill in Congress. But he was right. You were right. And so started the historical chapter, but then I said, Anthony, if we're gonna do this, and I leave office, and so we gotta do two things. We gotta do something that will withstand the test of time, because I'm a busy woman, I'm in corporate America, I got kids, they were babies at the time, I ain't got time for the nonprofit stuff. But I was like, but I have 5 minutes. I can do this. How do I change the world with my skill? I don't speak Ilocano or Tagalog. Okay, you drop me in the island, I do go native. But but I was like, what skill do I have? I did work in corporate. I know how to project management. I bring people together. I can get stuff done. That's the gift I can give to the community. And I have skin in the game now because I see an injustice. And a lot of it was because of crappy paperwork. That's BS. I can get through crappy paperwork. That's easy. So we mobilized and at the same time with the Filipino veterans, got that bill passed. It was the first time I ever seen Filipinos join forces in the United States ever. It's historical. But then I also started the Historical Society chapter. And I said, Anthony, gotta pass a bill, recognize all the lolos, not just my lolo, but then we gotta write a book. Because when I talked to my mayor, he's like, I didn't know Filipinos lived here. Oh, you didn't invite me out for punsit. Ew. Yeah, in the politics, they were like, y'all don't come out to vote.
And we don't give money, but that's the next, set of
well,
political conversations. Not to be had here, though.
Well, maybe. So tonight is Larry the Musical. And
tell us about that.
So that is actually written by some key FONS, Philippine American National Historical Society leaders in our community. Kevin Nadal is co-executive, but Gail Ramasanta, she's very good friends with Don Mabalan, who actually, it was her research that the story of Larry Itliong has come to light. And now is going to be a musical. It is going to be the Filipino Hamilton, and I have flown all the way from Texas to see this historical moment.
And be at FLYPINAY2024. That's also why I should
FLYPINAY2024, of course. But you guys gotta go see it. To me, it's you won't regret it. It's going to be beautiful. But that's what, like, if you think about the African American community, they get behind their people and telling their stories. They invest money in the artists because artists are our storytellers. That was the artifacts you leave behind on music and all those things. You got to commoditize that because that is what will withstand the test of time. People remember who tells the stories. And if we're not telling our own story, you're going to wait for some white guy to tell it? And they're not going to tell it right. Sure, they can do it, but then it's not going to be the same. So that's why I think investing in the community, that you guys got to consider that. But, that's how you change the world, right? A little bit at a time. And we wrote the book, and I know Joel's wanted to talk a little bit of how Filipinos and what they are, what they want in Houston that are different, but
Can you do it in 90 seconds?
I can't.
I'm getting like...
Yeah, the looks. But I mean, Filipinos, you have to think about your history here in the West Coast is different in the immigration story in Texas. Before 1965, there were only 800 Filipinos in Texas. After the law changed, if you had a skill, you got to move to the front of the line. Within 5 years, 20,000 Filipinos, mostly women, mostly nurses, mostly in Houston, Texas. Very matriarchal.
How many of y'all knew that? That's some good facts right there.
Well, come to the Philippine American National Historical Society Conference, July 16 to 20, and we'll be dropping some knowledge about where we're from. But that's basically, so that's what motivates the politics in the Filipinos in Houston. RIB, remember RIB? That's what I tell Anthony. Recognition, immigration, and business are their top priorities. And so, but then those are the kind of key things that business definitely, because you think about you guys here in the West Coast and maybe even the East Coast is the family construct is nurse and military.
Yeah.
In Texas, it's nurse and engineers. They're a STEM state. So if you think about that, and you think about what motivates that type of construct, then it's a different dynamic. But there is military in the middle of Texas and San Antonio, but it's mostly Air Force. So yeah, that's the difference between us and but there's more to be had. There's a lot of undiscovered history in Texas that I'm still learning, and guess what? It's new research that nobody else bothered to look up, right? If I don't tell the story, then nobody's gonna learn about it and do it. But anyways, that's it. More than 90 seconds, but it's done.
Can we all give it up for Ate Christie? Thank you so much. Please don't be a stranger. Come up and talk to her. Add her on Instagram. She is the ultimate resource and wellspring of knowledge, and we are just so
You guys are too.
grateful for you being here.
Ann and Gels do a quarterly visit to Houston.
We sure
to
do.
get their Texas on. So,
Okay.
all right, that's our cue to get off the stage.